Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Ascend, the third book in the Children of Divinity series, Chapter 31 and Epilogue. In these chapters, we find out that Briar Young is still alive. I hate this guy so much. All I wanted was for this one guy in specific to be dead. That was all I asked. Just this one. Everybody else, I was kind of like, do what you want. I think it's probably better if you kill Big Bad Man. But the one dude that I was like, no, but definitely, please kill him, is alive. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this episode. Heather says he's like a cockroach, and that's about it. There are just some people that are survivors. And sometimes survivor can be used in a really flattering way, where it's like you've gone through so much and you've just made such a success of yourself despite all the adversity. And sometimes survivor just means opportunistic, self-interested coward. And that is Briar. And I don't know what to make of the things that happen with him, but we'll get there. So this opens with Jordan having a drink, and she's sort of like out, I think she's on a balcony, and is essentially keeping herself separate from the rest of the party that is like hanging out together and seem to be genuinely celebrating and enjoying one another. And she is thinking about how Brian is out there doing God knows what. And it did not occur to me that Brian was going to just straight up be missing, because we did this already in a way. But because of how different this situation is, I can see why he would just need to possibly either relearn all over again how to get back to himself, or find some place that he can just stay and sacrifice anything like in the future because he doesn't think that there is hope. Because as far as he knows, I would assume that he would expect for Spears to be dead. And if there's if you don't have any hope in your heart that something is going to be doable for you to get better, and you're in the state that Brian seemed to be, staying away would feel like the really safe thing to do. That said, I'm not sure if knowing Spears was alive and an option for help would make any difference. It's really hard for me to tell how in his mind Brian is at all, because clearly he had enough control over himself to get himself out of Jordan's vicinity before he hurt her. So he had some presence of mind, but it wasn't enough to completely regain control and be around her. He had enough to hold himself off, and that's different. So I am sort of looking at this runaway as similar to the last one, where he's just training himself and will be able to reappear. But actually, there's not really a reason to believe that's the case, because it sounds like this is a really different circumstance than the last time. So I don't know what to think. And it didn't even enter my head that when we opened this chapter, he would just be gone and they would have no idea what happened. But what I find fascinating is like, I'm going to assume that a lot of technology is down and stuff. So they are looking for signs of him and they're not finding any. And I'm really curious about any eyewitnesses like at the scene right when he took off. If they saw what direction he went, like he's just, he is a type that one would think it'd be hard to hide. But if he swims and puts himself in a position where you're not looking for people, you're looking for animals, then maybe it would be a way for him to completely fly under the radar. And all this to say, when it comes right down to it, Brian is like possibly just out there killing people. And that sucks. Like, really, I have grown quite fond of Brian in a lot of ways because he's just the kind of normal guy in the midst of all of this insanity. And Jordan really was treating him badly, and his insecurities felt deeply reasonable to me. And I just get where he's coming from. I feel like in an alternate universe, I could see myself making all the same mistakes that Brian made. And him winding up in this place where he was this guy's fucking experiment to begin with, because the guy wanted to get at Jordan, which hurts right out of the gate, finding out that he's just a piece of shit and he thought he was your friend. Then you've got these like weird powers that you don't know how to control, and you've got no guidance, and you have to like figure it out. And even when you think I've got it under control and we can be together now, it turns out that you kind of don't have it under control. Like, you have it under control enough to get by, but you're not actually in a good place. It's a lot. It's a lot. And then, like, he's like eating people's heads and shit. And I don't know how much he remembers of that. I just really feel for this guy, man. He has gone through some trauma. He really has. So let's see. Even 3 months on, spirits were high. World governments had hailed Aegis, Echo Team, and Pendragon to be the saviors of mankind for stopping Vondra and his awakened soldiers. Only the members of the Vodnik were unaccounted for, and that didn't seem to bother anyone aside from Jordan. What? Why aren't more people worried about that? That feels like a real fucking problem to me. Like, I assume that they're thinking Trechuk is the guy who was the ringleader, and if they don't have a leader, then there's nobody that will be able to direct them as a threat. But Arcady was nobody to fuck with either. Anybody who has these powers, frankly, is nobody to fuck with. But Arcady was a leader of his own kind. He wasn't as good as Tretiak, granted. But still. And I just cannot imagine why people aren't worried about that. She had borne the medal ceremonies and the talk shows and the knighting she had received from the Queen of England, and did so with smiles and polite gratitude as she had been raised to do. I really, really wish that we got more information about this, because it didn't even enter my mind that she would have to be on talk shows and stuff. But like, are you kidding? That would be her entire life for probably a solid year, at least, if not like the entire rest of her life. This was a worldwide threat. This was the kind of attack that has never been seen in history, ever, as far as recorded history. And I have to assume Jordan is going to be one of the most recognized faces in the entire world. Like, I say that. Here's the thing. Sometimes the things that people do that are good, that they should be famous for, they don't quite really get as famous for as they should. And other like types of lame fame. I'm going to coin it. Lame fame. Edge them out. So maybe not, but I think probably. And I am really dying to know, like, everybody on the team here obviously played a part and maybe would be sought out. That's the part that I'm really interested in, to be honest, is like not just how it was for Jordan, but like, can you imagine Jill, you know, being invited onto like the Colbert Show for an interview, and she just like shows up in her Hello Kitty shirt and is just like, hey, so, and I mean, I can only imagine them being like, oh yeah, Steven's going to like cut his arm and you're going to heal it on camera, show everybody. I don't think they would do that, but it's just this sort of like the people who are sort of on the side, the edges of things, sometimes are the ones that get more attention because the main figurehead is, as is definitely the case here, kind of serious and intense. So it becomes more the role of the people who are in the sidelines and have less direct pressure on them that begin to grow to be favorites of the crowd. And I keep thinking about this in the, you know, like in the universe of, say, like the MCU, the fame of each of the Avengers is just a given. It's just the kind of, it's like almost like how the superstars of the movie would be treated here in real life. And I don't know how Jordan would come off. I'm deeply curious what kind of persona she puts on and how much people respond to that. Or, because we all know misogyny is a hell of a thing. And you could be the literal woman who saved the earth, and it's still going to be a 50-50 on whether folks are going to be on your side or against you. And then there's that inevitable thing that happens with fame, where everybody's singing your praises and they love you, and then something comes up and they turn on you. Either a thing that people hadn't known about your history and it gets dredged back up, or some invented shit. It doesn't really matter. But we love, in a way, altering our opinion and like there being that inevitable backlash. I regret to inform you that Milkshake Duck is a racist. So anyway, just like this whole bit, because it's Jordan and she hates, like, she's good at it to a point. We've only seen a little bit of it from her, but, you know, being married to an ambassador, she had to do the small talk thing. She's had to do the hold herself with poise and represent kind of thing. So we know that she's like gotta be at least adequate at that. But when you're going on a talk show, it's going to be a really different sort of vibe. And how is she going to pull that off? Like, you know? Anyway, this just got me so curious. Sorry, Heather's in the chat says, my thoughts re the Vodnik is the fact that they're mercenaries means in most people's minds that they'll have ample opportunities to get them later. Yeah, that's fair. LOL. So I've always thought that Jordan, when she was doing all of this, was in costume and her mask is designed to help keep her from being recognized in her civilian life. Oh, God, that didn't even occur to me, Heather. That would be so interesting. Now, see, I want to see that. Because certainly in the MCU, everybody's actual faces are the things, you know, they're not just in their costume. Their costumes usually don't really even have masks, you know, Iron Man being the exception on that. So the idea that they're all, I mean, I can't recall, does Stryker have a helmet also? Basically, my question is like, is everybody's identity totally protected? So they're all just going to be sort of like action figures in a way to the outside? That changes things, and that makes it really interesting because, like, if you wanted to have fun, you could just act very erratically and kind of troll people a little bit, which I would never do. But honestly, that sounds really fun. The mains have masks, Heather says. Okay. Also, I am taking notes of things you're commenting you'd like to see and will present them to Garth as story ideas. Oh, I love it. I love it, Heather. Yeah. I just like Jordan having to do the talk show circuit. And then, like, I'm imagining Jordan has her own YouTube channel. And it would be really fun if they were like, well, we need funding. So what are we going to do? And she starts like a YouTube channel to teach like combat skills or something. And she is sponsored by, who would she be sponsored by? I'm going to say, Casper mattresses, just because she'd be like, you know, what is also important for your physical health is getting adequate sleep. It'd be something like that, because I don't think she would take like protein powders. You know, she doesn't need that shit. But like a nice bed, I feel like that's something that she would need and could appreciate, whether or not you've got powers. And that would be part of the selling point. It's like, I may have powers that give me a great metabolism and make me strong, but I don't have powers that make a bed that sucks comfortable. So I need Casper mattress. Oh man. Heather says, Jill having one and teaching first aid would be great too. No. You know what Jill would teach, Heather. She would have a cooking show. And her shit would be out of pocket. She would be like the pink sauce girl. She would make shit that people are watching this like unhinged assembly of food and her sitting and eating it all. And it would just be like, what? Yeah, I really like that idea though, especially because there's like a whole thing with ice cream in this chapter. And she has a Hello Kitty special. And I will tell you guys about how upsetting I found this in a moment, but we'll get there. Okay. So back to the thing, but I'm coming back to this, Heather, because this is a fairly short section in total for reading. So I have room to just talk about this, which is really fun, actually. So she's just thinking about how everything about Brian she misses. And she had said it's been 6 months, and I couldn't remember how long he was missing before they wound up like getting him back, before he turned up again on his own, basically. I feel like it was only a week or a couple weeks. So this is quite a long time. Heather says 3 weeks. Okay, yeah. 6 months is a really long time. And if you just straight up don't know if you're ever going to see somebody again, like the agony of that. I have always said, in terms of true crime stuff, the ones where somebody is murdered, truly horrible. But there is at least, you know what happened. And then there's like the unsolved mysteries where somebody just disappeared and never was heard from again. And nobody knows. And that, for me, is a nightmare. Just knowing your entire life, waiting, being in this like sort of suspended state where even a decade could pass and somewhere in your mind, you're still wondering what the fuck. And you maybe have come to terms with the fact that perhaps somebody is dead. But still, what if they're not, though? Or what if they didn't die right away? And what if they are dead now? But, you know, like all the what ifs. That sounds like real torture to me. That constant uncertainty. The way that our own imaginations can be so much worse than what actually happened. So you could be imagining all these horrific things. And maybe what happened is like they slipped and fell in a weird spot where nobody would find them. And that was just, you know, and that's unlikely, granted, in most of these cases. But it is this kind of scary thing where I was listening to a Snapped episode the other day. I'm not big on true crime because a lot of it's kind of depressing. But Snapped is about women who kill. And so it can be kind of fun because these bitches are, some of them are crazy. But some of them I'm like, no, but you did the right thing. And there was this one guy who died and nobody found him for like 3 weeks. And it wasn't until I think it was like a utility company had to come and like turn something off. And they found there was like a smell coming out through the front door. It was closed and locked, and they could smell it. And then they saw the flies on the inside of the window. And just like how many weeks passed and nobody knew that this guy was even gone. And just, it's very easy for something to happen in a way that maybe nobody ever finds you. And it wasn't even an intentional thing. So that's just scary for me. And then the fact that, you know, he is capable of what he is and not in control of himself. And now you have a whole other angle of like horrible things that you could be imagining. And it's not just what could be going on with him, but what he could be inflicting on somebody else, and wondering, even if I find him, is he like going to be the same person by then? Because whether or not you can get him out of this state he was put in, if somebody has been like basically visiting atrocities on strangers, like innocent people, and they can remember what they were doing and they're brought out of the state they were in, they now have to live with those memories, which is its own whole other kind of horrific thing to deal with. So this just sucks. And I feel really bad for Jordan, because it's her and Brian just feel like they've got a little bit of a curse on them, you know? Heather says, when I was a kid, a friend of mine had an older sister that disappeared while hitchhiking. That happened when I was like 9. And when I was 17, I was dozing on the couch and was awakened by the sound of a woman sobbing. The next morning, I heard they found her body. Oh my God, Heather, I just got chills all over. Ah, oh my God. So they found her body years later, but she had been dead for years, or had she been alive and then they found her body and she had died years later? Like maybe she took off or something. They found her bones in the desert. Oh God, the poor thing. That's horrific. That's like truly nightmare scenario. I mean, at least they got closure eventually, but 8 years? Her parents must have, I was going to say her mother, but like, why? Her parents must have just been, and her sister. That's just awful. God. Well, at least she was found. That's wild about hearing somebody crying, though. That's such a consistent thing. I have an aunt that happened to like 2 or 3 times. She would hear somebody crying, and then there would be a death in the family the next day. And it was always the sort of thing where she would have, enough time would have passed that she had forgotten what happened the last time she heard crying. So she'd just be like, God, did you hear that? And then she'd find out about the death and be like, oh my God, right, I forgot. Just a weird thing. So Heather says, I have shit like that happen all the time. I'm what people call a sensitive. It sucks sometimes. Yeah. And this is the kind of thing that I have long suspected that I could be more open to things if I decided to be, and I have no interest. So thank you. I'll pass. And I have put a hard lock on any openness in that regard. And I'm like, in theory, to be able to be like, I saw a ghost sounds dope. I know myself. I would never be able to relax again in my life. I would never be able to, like, absolutely not. I have a hard enough time with like a movie. Just no. Count me out. Thanks, but no thanks. Just the mere idea. So anyway, let's see. Ryan and her new artificially intelligent friend had been methodically searching for Brian, and so far he remained elusive. And this is like a nice reminder, and we see later Jenna is like taking form in front of everybody. It's wild to me to think about Jenna having friends, and I really wonder how that's changing anything for her, if it is at all. So at this point, Douglas and Ryan are right there being like, hey man, you gotta come inside. And she says, I'm going to be atrocious company. And Douglas says, what's another hour? It's been 3 months. Douglas. Honestly, I would find that pretty funny. Like, it's the kind of thing that if you say that to the wrong person, they're going to be very offended. But I really appreciate just shit being acknowledged. And sometimes it being like, no, you've been terrible company. It's fine. We know. I would find that strangely reassuring. Just like, yeah. And we know what we're getting into. We're inviting you in, not because we think that you're going to be better now. It's because we would like for you to be around, even though you're feeling bad, because we care about you. So Jordan then says, I'm not feeling particularly sociable, and it isn't just because of Brian. The world, it's angry. Rightly so, but I don't know what to do about it. And Douglas says all these protesters and racists will run out of steam sooner or later. And I was just like, oh, Douglas. Oh, Douglas. No, they won't. They will not. They won't. They sure won't. Wanting to let things run out of steam is like the exact recipe for how we got where we are in the first place. Is we had this incredibly passive attitude of just like, just let the old people who still believe in the thing die out and we'll be fine. Because we just didn't want to see that that's not how it works. And Jordan says they want to take away our rights. And part of me wonders if it isn't the right thing to do. Humanity isn't ready for this. And I was like, word? Take away your rights. And you're like, what does that mean? She says, put us on reservations. And honestly, this is the kind of thing that, like, when you say it like that, it really gives it a whole different spin than, you know, have facilities where you can learn to train and control your abilities. Like, you could frame it like, we're, you know, sort of undergoing an initiative to make sure everybody is granted the opportunities that, in the way that sort of Dr. Spears was trying to pretend he was doing. But what it is segregating you from the rest of the population. And as we know, that doesn't tend to be a great thing. That's not an indicator that we're, you know, so I'm really surprised. I understand her saying the world isn't ready for this, but also, oh, well, it's too late. What do you think taking away rights is going to do? I mean, what would that even look like? And Ryan says, I think you've been right all along. Humanity needs an example. They need protectors who can show them the right way. We're going to do that. We have done that. You work so fast compared to the rest of the world that you don't realize how little time has truly gone by. I see things like you do. My mind is always so fast. But human culture doesn't work that way. It's slow, ponderous. They will get there. We will get there. And this is when Douglas says that, because Jordan says, you're always so upbeat. He says, that's why I love her. And later Jordan is just like, so love, huh? And yeah, so they're taking things to the next level. So, let's see. Nobody will fault you for taking some time to yourself, Ryan added. Jenna and I will keep hunting too. She's not really up to speed yet, and she spends a lot of time contemplating, but she wants to help. Any update on Lena? Jordan asked, and it took me a minute to remember who Lena was. And then when I remembered, I was like, oh no. After she's still in the hospital after everything she's been through, I'm not surprised that she's suicidal. What about her powers? She refuses to use them. I can't blame her. She's probably terrified. Maybe you should go see her, Jordan. She knows you. And hates me. There's no love between us. I'm just as likely to make her worse as help her. Brian might be able to get through to her, but we know where that stands, don't we? I'm really curious about this. Because Lena's like, her whole, everything about the way things went for her, it wasn't just that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Although certainly that was part of it. But Lena had this like ambition of a type that's always been kind of like alien to me, which is to say she wanted to be with somebody who was a big deal, but she didn't really want to be the big deal. And as somebody who, of course, wants to be the big deal, the whole concept of just, oh no, it doesn't have to be about me. I just want to be like around success and power. Part of me is like, why? Why wouldn't you just want it? And then another part of me thinks, well, it's a lot less work to not have it and just be around it. And you just get to like sort of have the fun parts, really. But so part of me is like, girl, you were trying it on with a married man, copping an attitude with his wife when he wasn't interested and being real shady, immediately moved on to this other dude who just like happened to be the next rich, successful man. And you threw in with the wrong one. And I'm not blaming her for the situation that she's in terms of what he did to her, obviously. But as somebody who is very much eat the rich, you cannot get involved with a man who has that kind of money and power and think he's a good person. You just can't. You just can't. So all of this to sort of be like, I really feel for her. And it's just so shitty because this is so far beyond imagining of what wrong could have come. You know, usually when you have this sort of thing and there's a woman that's like, I don't even want to call her a gold digger because that feels really just about the money. And I don't even feel like it was for her. But when you have somebody who is a power digger, I suppose you could say, and it's a woman going after a man, the retribution most people like sort of enjoy in this gleeful, gross way is her getting replaced. Like she has this guy and then eventually she ages, he moves on to somebody younger and she winds up having to like figure out what her life is when it's not about him. And what's going on with her actually is that he violated everything about her bodily autonomy. He began abusing her, as we saw, from the way that he was like talking to her and thinking about her, because he had a particular behavior that he wanted to see. So he was like trying to train her like a dog and left her a completely changed species, essentially. Like she doesn't even know her own body anymore. Which I don't know how many people out there who have had a moment of like their body doing a thing it shouldn't and that weird feeling of disconnect and like, wait, that's not how that should be. But imagine the scale it would be on where she gets scared and God knows what happens just from a reaction of like tension or fear. And she has no control over it at all. So it's like this man is continuing to assault her after he's dead. Everything. It's like basically if you were raped and got pregnant, but you just have to stay pregnant forever. Like that's as close and that may feel like a really dramatic comparison, but I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. She was forced into something. I am assuming. I don't think that he talked to her about it. He was going to do the thing to her and it was not about her. And now there, as far as we know, is not a way to reverse it. That sucks. Ugh. So I'm curious to see if anything like moves forward with her at all. And then we find out that Reggie is here. And Ryan and Jordan are both way more receptive to Reggie being rehabilitated, essentially. Douglas, not a little bit. Like, just, he is tolerating her because these two women are telling him to give her a chance. But it is very clear if he had his druthers, she would not be here. There's a real sense of him feeling as if, like, her being here is kind of fucked up, really. And I just have so much sympathy for Reggie. And I know, like, all things considered, it's so awful. Especially with Chance. And she picks up on a thought that Jordan has about how she's dead inside. And there's this moment of like understanding that passes between the two of them, because Reggie lost somebody and she like lost him. There is a possibility Brian can come back, and he, you know, with everything going on, it has its own list of downsides. But when somebody's dead, there's just no possibilities. It's over. That's it. That's the end of the story. So yeah, she would understand that. And let's see, I'm trying to find this next one. Here it is. Okay. Jill asks Jordan what she wants to have ice cream wise. And Jordan says, I'll be adventurous. And Jill says, perfect, I can make you one of my Hello Kitty specials. 3 types of sherbet with a nice scoop of pink peppermint ice cream on one side. Jill, honestly, what lunatic are you? What are you talking about? How is... Absolutely not. No. It's just for the colors, I'm assuming. I have to think it's just all about how like pretty pastel these all are together. No. Get a hold of yourself. That is an atrocity. I'm offended. So Jordan says, no, I was thinking chocolate chip mint. And Jill says, I suppose that's better than your beloved French vanilla. And this is a moment for me where I was imagining, Heather, your husband sitting down to like write a character profile for Jordan. And favorite ice cream, and it's just French vanilla. And I have decided I don't like Jordan that much. And I think this is why. Because she is that type. She wants the absolute bare minimum for anything. She doesn't seem to enjoy life in a way that feels like relatable to me. And that's not to say I don't like her and like I dislike her, but I just don't understand her. There's like, and I mean understand in like a relatable, you know, that kind of understanding where it's like, no, I see you, I get it. I can intellectually understand what Jordan is like, but nothing about her is something that would be a person I want to be friends with. I guess that's what it really comes down to. She is just so utilitarian, I guess, is kind of the vibe for me. And I'm just so not. Our priorities would be in completely different places. So, and I want to make it clear. It's nothing about like French vanilla itself. Ice cream is spectacular. So it's not like I'm saying if you like vanilla, you're boring, because vanilla is honestly one of my favorite flavors of a lot of things. But it just feels, because of what I know about Jordan in context, it feels more boring because of her. You know what I mean? And then Jill is like, do you want hot fudge on that? And I was like, yo, I don't know why I have never thought about having a hot fudge sundae with mint chip ice cream, but that sounds so good. I never even thought of it. I'm not kidding. And do that, and you get some of those like Thin Mints from the what do you call them? Girl Scouts. Crumble that on top. Forget it. Oh my God. That sounds insane. I want it right now. I had a favorite drink at Starbucks that was called Midnight Mint, and it devastated me because they haven't done it again, and I don't know why not. But it was a dark chocolate frappuccino with cookie crumbs and mint syrup. And it was not nearly as sweet as most of their sweet drinks, which I can't even finish because they're just too much to me. But it was so much more subdued because the chocolate was really dark and heavy, and it was fantastic. And they have never made them again. And I've begun to realize I don't like mint by itself, but I like mint with a chocolate base, and then I will have mint all day. I don't get tired of it. It's like those Andes mints. So anyway, all this to say, I'm going to be making this, and Heather, if you book more episodes, I will report back and tell you how I felt about it, because it sounds like there's no way to lose. It just sounds like a no lose situation. Oh, Heather is saying, in fairness to Jordan, her senses are heightened in a way that ours aren't, which means that the taste of French vanilla is actually nuanced for her. True, but like, I feel like if you have really heightened senses, then certain other things should be even more, you know? I don't know. She's just gonna, I feel like with Jordan, it's whatever's the least effort, because she puts most of her energy into action. And that's just something that's not really quite, you know. Oh my God, that sounds like a liquid Thin Mint. Exactly. That said, I would go chocolate peanut butter myself. That's usually my standby. Nobody cares. I have 2 favorite flavors, depending on what we're getting. And if it's Ben and Jerry's, it's Americone Dream. It's just a perfect ice cream. The crunchiness of the bits of, you know, it's the best. And if I'm going to Braum's, which is a place that's like near us that you go and get cones, their peanut butter ripple is one of the best chocolate peanut butter ice creams I've ever had. So agreed. So I'm sorry, guys. This was a short section, and I spent how much of it talking about like cooking shows and YouTube and ice cream? Okay. You know what? I guess that's what the show is. So this is when we go to Briar, and he is springing Calamity from prison. She punches her former guard in the face and then says, "That's for grabbing my ass." And I thought for a moment she was punching Briar. And then it says she glanced over her shoulder. So Briar, like, for a second, I had this all wrong. Briar brushed a blonde hair from his borrowed police uniform. For a moment, I had it like he was coming to get her out legally, like she was on bail. And then he's got the borrowed police uniform, but she punches somebody on the way out, and he has is dressed like a police officer, and nobody really does anything. Do they know that that he isn't who he says? It felt like her punching this guy, is what I'm getting at, would be like a real giveaway that things are not on the up and up, but I can't tell what the situation is. Like, if the guard was unconscious and he's the only one, I don't know. She says, "I owe you for getting me out of here before the feds transported me back to the Supermax. But get this straight, because I'm only going to tell you one time. No touching, no bullshit. I'm an equal partner." And Heather says her luck might have been working in her favor. Yeah, I keep forgetting like how that can just be happening anytime, you know, and not something that has to be like activated. So that makes sense. The woman had just come from an appearance in federal court after 3 months of hard time in America's newest awakened prison. She was still proud, still fearsome. Reluctantly, Calamity slid onto the black plastic seat and let Young shut the door that could only be opened from the outside. And I'll tell you what, when it said that, I was kind of like, oh no. Because I almost wondered if Briar, I don't think so now that he like explains what his plan is, but there was a moment where I was thinking maybe Briar got bribed by somebody to bust her out and bring her to them. So it wasn't going to turn out to be like, oh, I let you out because I want to go on the run and you can help, which is what it does turn out to be. But that I pretended to let you out and it turns out you're actually just going to be handed over to somebody who either wants to use you or wants revenge and wants to hurt you, or, you know. But as it turns out, He wants her to help him with the luck of getting out of the country and going somewhere with no extradition. And that makes complete sense. That's a really smart idea, actually, to like specifically get her. Let's see. None of my former partners really managed to do shit to Aegis or Pendragon. You, however, seem to be adept at it. Probability manipulation is a handy power, yeah? I need someone to watch my back, and you don't want to spend life in prison. A match made in heaven if I've ever seen one. I help you out of prison, you help me out of country, and we go make shitloads of bloody cash. And she's just sort of like, I don't know about this guy. Like, I know he's full of shit. And she clearly, when she says no touching, she knows some shit that he has been doing. Like, she's aware the type of guy he is. But they agree to 50-50. Soon the police will be after them after they hosed out the station. Wait a minute. I feel like that didn't hit for me. I did stop and sort of go, what does that mean? And now I'm realizing, oh, is that why nobody stopped them? Because the place is absolutely, completely leveled and everybody's dead? Hosed out sounds just like it's just a pool of blood and they just needed to, ooh, ouch, yikes. That sucks. And he pats a suitcase and says, I picked up a few alien knickknacks to help us out. I think you'll approve. And I am really curious what those are. And I'm curious if they're going to be things that we've seen before and we'll be like, oh yeah, that would be handy. Or if it's going to be like new stuff, because God knows there's plenty of stuff that wouldn't have even come up probably. So then we go to Jordan and Ryan, and they are looking at her new costume. It was different from her old one, with long, graceful lines swooping down that would rest against her jaw. Along with the larger eye coverings, they were just thick enough to alter her facial structure and reduce the likelihood that any sort of facial recognition software would be able to pick her out if she got caught on camera. The boots are coated with a silencing polymer, and the sole can alter their print if you're being chased. Jordan smiled as she examined the knee-high boots with the tips of her fingers. The material was softer than she expected, aside from the armored plating along the front. Very dominatrix, Ryan. I didn't know you had such a wicked streak in you. And Ryan says they're like your last pair for the most part, just better. So I am really curious about what those look like. Because, of course, when I hear that the boots are thigh-high, my immediate thought is like stiletto heels, which is absolutely 100% not going to be the case. So I'm just trying to picture like flat boots that are thigh high, which is not a look that you see very much when I stop and think about it, because usually thigh high is meant for sexy, and sexy does not usually go with flat. That's just the way that our fashion and society have decided it goes. So yeah, trying to picture this would be interesting. And this is when oh my God, Heather says sneakers because she's literally sneaking in them. I didn't even think of that. Oh, get out of here, Heather. So then Jordan's like, I don't know about this cape. It's going to get in the way. It's bullet resistant, thermal profile negative, has an electronic camouflage surface that runs off the mask's sensors. Look at something, trigger it, and you will be nearly invisible. I even designed quick release catches just in case. With a simple vocal command or 3 taps on the right fastener, the whole thing retracts into the back of the breastplate. Trust me, this is an amazing tool, not a fashion accessory. I adore this, a retractable cape. I am sure that this has been done somewhere, but I don't remember it from anywhere. And what a simple and fantastic idea. I love this. Honestly, this is kind of a mood for just in general. Like, I am somebody who tends to be perpetually cold. As you can see, it is August in Texas. Oh my God, no, it's not. It's September now. Jesus. And I am sitting here in a long sleeve shirt and leggings and a sweater because I'm always cold. And having a retractable blanket that I could just wear around my neck, and I retract it when I need to get up, go to the kitchen, cook something, and then I can just whoop, let it drop and cozy on up. That sounds amazing. Yes, please. If it were a blanket, though, it would have to be a hell of a collar. It would have to be very, very thick collar. That would be hilarious. Maybe it's something that has a lot of like loft to it, so it gets smushed down quite small, like one of those tents that you know, just press on it and it just explodes into a whole tent. Oh, okay. Heather says Thor's cape can retract, but this was written prior to us seeing that, I think. I didn't remember that Thor's cape could retract. Huh. Yeah, that makes sense, though. So she asks if there's a manual, and Ryan says it's hidden in the ebook file of Black Beauty. I type in that 15-digit code. Just type in that 15-digit code I gave you, and it will open up. All of it is encrypted, so nobody will just stumble on it. And that is a really smart idea that never occurred to me, is just hiding really important stuff under like the cover of a book that nobody's going to pay any attention to in your Kindle library, you know? And when she says it's Black Beauty, they're both like, Jill, there it is. And she wants to go with her, and Ryan says I talked her out of it. So what she's getting ready to do is go and search for Brian. And she says she's going to start at home in London. And then if he isn't there, she'll check his villa in Spain. Which truly, I can't imagine saying that sentence with a straight face. I really can't. I will check his villa in Spain. I have to confess, my eat the rich attitude lately is so intense that I had total sympathy for her and Brian in this situation. And then she said, I'll check his villa in Spain. And my entire self like recoiled and just kind of went, nah, screw these guys. And it really was quite sudden. And I noticed it. I noticed like my own reaction to it and was like, yo, calm down. But I just have to acknowledge it, that it was there. And I was just kind of like, ugh, villa in Spain, you're the worst. So anyway, Ryan tells her, if you find a rumor of him or a sign, that will show you how fast he could get anywhere else you enter. Of course, his water speed is conjecture based on his known muscle strength, swimming adaptations, and I was a little bit confused. If you find a rumor, that will show you how fast he could get anywhere else you enter. So, like, if you find a rumor and you're staying at the house nearby, it's going to show you how fast he can get from wherever the rumor was to you. Is that what she's trying to say? Basically. And she says, we're in this together, just like when we were children and helped each other no matter what. Remember when you broke your legs? And Jordan's like, yeah, and you broke Mom's Jag. And this is a nice little moment of the two of them just thinking about like being children and having one another's backs and how simple it was. And Jordan is just like thinking to herself about how nothing lately feels like actually just joyful. There's moments of laughter and moments of smiles, but it's all encased in this constant anxiety and pain and stress and loss. And it says Jordan was leaving her family, both of blood and heart, to pursue her missing husband. She was turning her back on the world she helped create, and that made her feel guilty. Being a symbol was much harder than being a killer or an operative or even a wife. And I just felt for her here. I mean, I think this is just growing up. Even if you're not in this insane sort of situation, it's just really something to think back on what life was like when you were young and how important certain things really felt to you and how simple it really was. And that's not necessarily true for everybody or to the same degrees, of course. But because as a kid, most of us never really had the same understanding of consequences or potential disaster. And we all pretty much like often just assumed it's going to work out because that's what things do. They work out. And it did work out because you had people who were doing that part and you just didn't know about it. So to you, it seemed like it just worked out. It's just fascinating to me, the transformation of going from this like beautiful state of youth and the mental state that goes with that, and then growing and realizing like what you lost, what you didn't appreciate. And I am certain 10 years from now, I'll be looking at myself at 37 going, wow, I really was not appreciating what I had. But it's just the nature of how it works, is we are destined to never really appreciate the moment. And if we do, it's sort of fleeting. It happens in these little bits and it's not a sustained thing. And it's just tough, man. You know, it's like that's the beauty of it, but it feels so tied in with the pain of it that it almost is like, is it worth it? And that's really the question that we all have, right? Is it worth it? And I don't know. Like, I have to assume for different people, it's going to be a different answer. Even for the same situation, two different people would have a very different answer. So, Heather has a link. I kind of envisioned something like this for the boots, and she's sharing a link from ASOS. Oh, okay. Yeah, these are flat thigh high boots. All right. God, this girl, it's so funny. Whenever I look at like these kinds of boots and there's wrinkles, I'm just like, how tiny must this model be? Because I wouldn't be able to get those boots on just to begin with. And if I could, you had better believe, even at my thinnest, there would not be a wrinkle, nary a wrinkle in sight. It would simply be packed as packed can be. And she looks like she's just like wrapped in a shower curtain. That is just wild. Yeah. So anyway, all right. So question, Heather, because you had said that there are some short stories. They're not on my schedule here on Crowdcast yet, but have you commissioned them? And Candace just hasn't entered them yet? Or are they not commissioned yet and you're sort of like waiting to see what you're going to do? I just wanted to know for now whether or not that was something that was definitely coming up, because I'm really curious about it, since the book really doesn't end in a way that feels like there's any closure. There are so many directions he could go in, and there are so many loose ends to tie up that you could do a whole other book. And it seemed like he was just going to do a trilogy, but is this going to be more than just 3 books? Or is it really the short stories that are sort of wrapping some things up? Heather says, I have not yet. Okay. I just wanted to double check, because I know sometimes Candace, it'll take a little bit for her to be able to get around to doing the full schedule. She says he's approaching it kind of like a comic book series. This was the first arc of Jordan's story. Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. All right, that's fun. Yeah, this is just a really interesting world, because it has some of the elements of you know, something like the MC. There's just no not comparing it. Of course I'm going to. And yet it does feel a lot more grounded and a lot more personal. You know, there are big world events happening, but it does really feel like it's about Jordan. And as much as I feel like I don't relate to Jordan and I don't get her, I do think that she's an interesting character. And it was an interesting experience to watch her treating Brian so badly and not be sure whether I was supposed to think that. So I did like that eventually there comes a point where she's like, man, I fucked that up. I just like it whenever a character is behaving badly and it's not explicit by the way it's written, whether the author realizes it or not. Sometimes the author is clearly like, get a load of this bitch. And you're like, yeah, get a load of this bitch. And sometimes you'll get a sense the author is sort of on the side of this character who's doing a very shitty thing. And you're like, yo, what's your problem, guy? But when it's written about in such a distanced way, I really didn't know. And I was sort of like asking myself, am I overreacting sometimes? Like the way that Brian sort of acted as well, where he was wondering, am I doing too much? And it's very interesting that in this last chapter, and I didn't mention it, she looks at Jason and there is no flicker of anything. She doesn't have any urge toward him at all. And she's like a little bit freaked out by it, I think. It's like a combo of, I would like just that as its own problem to take my mind off of what's actually bothering me. And also, she has changed so much that something that felt like a force of nature has no effect on her whatsoever anymore. And I find that really interesting as well, because I had been as close to she was as thinking it was a supernatural attraction of some kind. And it looks like it really wasn't. And that makes it worse somehow, that the attraction was that strong, but there was nothing like supernatural about it. Yikes. I kind of hate that for her. I mean, granted, it's gone now, but I don't know. Sometimes shit just comes back. Who knows what's happening? Let's see. I will pass it along to Garth because I think that there's something that was missing in Brian's characterization. Brian is quite a lot older than Jordan and was grooming her from a young age, so that's something that should probably be touched on. Oh. I don't remember that at all. Wow, how do I not remember that? From a young age? How much older than her is he? I didn't remember that at all. Let's see, that was missing from his characterization. So this is something that you're saying maybe wasn't in the books at all? Or was it just said in such a sort of subtle way that I didn't pick up on it? They've known each other for something like 15 years, and she's only 25 or so. Oh. I didn't realize that when she knew him, he was like that much older than her, so that the, age difference from knowing him since she was 10, I guess here, would be that dramatic. I thought, she was 10 and he was like 15 or something, kind of, something that feels very, like a very big age difference as a child, and then you get older and it's nothing. Yeah, I had no idea about that, Heather. Interesting. Yeah, that changes a lot. I wish I had known that, because I didn't register it at all. Heather says she doesn't really think about it, but we can definitely expand on that. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an interesting thing to add into the mix of him desperately wanting to like hang on to her. It's just, especially because she's not going to like age the same way as a regular person. So I'm thinking about Leonardo DiCaprio because he's 25. And even if he were the kind of like gross dude that would just be done with her at 25, that's not going to happen if you just don't really age, unless it's about attitude, which will change, I'm sure. Well, got a lot to think about there. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up, but thank you very much, Heather, for commissioning this. And thank you to anybody who was listening. And until I see you with some stories, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
an Unspoiled Network podcast.